talk today about how a website is not one and done. It needs to be seen to regularly. I have 6 things that I want to talk about keeping up your website, and I'm sure Colleen's got 6 completely different ones. So let's get started. Colleen, the first thing that people should do when they go to their own website, let's say every Sunday evening, just as an example, what should they check for?
So one of the first things I always like to make sure is double checking your address and your contact information, because that when Google does an update or some of the other search engines do an update, sometimes that can just go a little askew and get lost, or you're like, hey, I was here the other day, where did it go? Or how come it's on 5 lines instead of 3 lines? And so just really, that's the most important thing. And I know it sounds kind of like almost stupidly obvious, but those are the most important things when a customer is coming to your website, is really where are you located, what's your telephone number, what are your hours of operation as well. Like, I would think those 3 things are the most important, so double check them all the time that they're current. What about you, Kate?
It may seem kind of overkill, but as Colleen says, things change on the internet and they may impact your website. So it's a very, very important thing to check it frequently. Colleen suggests once a week. I suggest whenever you have a spare moment, more than once a week perhaps. The easiest thing to check on your website is that all of your links work. If you are linking to your town's Chamber of Commerce, if you are linking to a friend's website, if you are linking to your blog or your Shopify account that's not on your main website, make sure those links go where you want them to go. That is a really easy thing for the various internet engines to mess up. So stop, look at it, make sure that is exactly the page that you want them to be on.
And another great point to that as well is if you have an e-commerce website and your website is linked to either Traxia or Liberty or whatever POS you use, sometimes like when their software updates, that throws your product and your lineups out of whack. So it's really important to check your links, like when you have a link to women's category or men's category or shoes or, accessories, like just give those a click and double check that, oh, yep, my accessories are going to the right space, like everything is linked up properly, because it happens so often.
And along with the idea of links,
you need to also...
Sorry, you froze there for a second. Go ahead.
Oh, I know. No, go ahead. You go on. This show is inspired by Kate because she was on a website and couldn't find basic information, and we had a conversation about it, and I sort of explained, like, this is why that can happen, and this is why it's really, really important to check your websites all the time. So go on. What else you got on your hot little list?
On my hot little list right after links is checking your menu, making sure that your menu goes where you want it to, making sure that your menu doesn't go to a blank page. For instance, if you've got on your menu, if you have a calendar and you've never used your calendar, do something about that. Put something in your calendar is the easiest thing to do. You could also delete it from your menu if you're sophisticated. But if you're getting to a point where a menu item is going to a blank page or going to a 404 page, that's the page that says there's nothing here, you mistyped, blah, blah, blah. Make sure you correct that. Either you do it or your webmaster does it. Very, very important to make sure that your menu leaves people where you want them to do. The next thing on my list was making sure that things load. If you have a little app on your website that, for instance, pulls up a Google map, make sure that it is pulling up the Google map, because again, things change. It could have worked last week. You have no idea why it's not working this week, but it's important to make sure that it does work. So don't sit there and feel all sorry for yourself. Make sure that your website represents the best of your store, because goodness knows, you're vacuuming, you're washing those nose prints off the mirrors. You don't want to neglect your website while you're doing something in your bricks and mortar.
Well, I think that's a really important thing of what you said. So our lists are very similar because I was going to talk about, like, I call it the page of death, or the DOA page, dead on arrival. And you click on a link or you click on something and, like, there's that, error, or the error 404, whatever, this page is no longer in existence. And it's really important that you don't have those. And if you don't have an event, if you thought, like, oh yeah, we're going to have an events calendar, that's a really great idea. But all of a sudden you're realizing, you know what, we don't really use our events calendar. Have your web developer disable your calendar for the time being, or find new uses for it. Make sure that you go in and put your sales up on it, or put, like, flash sales, or just whatever, like, find different things, like your spring consignment is now being accepted. I mean, if you really sit and think about it, and we did this a couple years ago in one of our pre-NARTS conference trainings, and we talked about all the different things you could use for a calendar. I mean, there's just so much information you can put on a calendar that's communicative to people. But the most important thing is just don't have any of those DOA pages on your website. Worst case scenario, get your web developer to put up, like, a really pretty photo of your store. If you have something literally like we are, coming soon, we're going to have a blog here, whatever, but just no DOA pages. Dead on arrival. No, bad.
It's called a 404 page, and as Colleen suggests, if you're going to have a 404 page, everybody needs to have one on their website. Make sure it gives them something. It rewards them for some way. Don't just say there is no such page. Put a picture of your shop up there. Put a picture of your dog saying, oh, my dog must have hit the keyboard. Something of that sort. Do something that has some personality, that shows your branding, instead of just a standard static 404 page. Along those lines, people will get error messages based on what device they're using and based on what browser they're using. So be sure to check your website on various types of devices, whether it's a Mac or a PC or a tablet or a laptop or a phone. Get a friend to check it on her different type of phone. Different type of browsers will make things look different ways. Look up and see which is the most common browser that people use to look at your website, and design for that, and then hope that the other browsers look pretty good. If not, again, talk to your web developer. You probably won't have that problem if you're using one of the standard WordPress, Weebly, what's the other ones, Colleen? Probably won't have that, but be sure to test them on different devices and different browsers.
Yes, and don't get obsessed with trying to make every graphic look the same on every phone, because there are like a lot of different phones out there, and different models and years and things like that. But really what Kate is trying to say is, the whole idea is that you at least know that on the most popular phones right now, and on iPads, and on laptop computers, that your website is showing up in a very presentable manner, and everything fits in the screen and you can read it. Yeah. Really to see, and I see, like, I'm going to throw this in here as a little pro tip, extra tip, that people design beautiful Facebook cover pages, but they forget to check how the cover page looks on their phones. And so when you're looking on Facebook, like, the phone number or an address or store hours or something, your name of your store is, like, actually cut off. So that's just another little sidebar pro tip there, is to make sure when you're designing your Facebook page, even though you might use a program that says this is a template for Facebook cover pages, this is a template for a website, homepage photo, even though it says that, you still
they lie.
They lie. So you make sure you But don't get away with trying to make sure it works on like every single, iPhone that ever came out or every Android that ever came out. Just kind of stick with the basics. But that is a really, really important thing. What else you got, Kate, on your hot list?
The rest of my hot list really refers to redesigning or designing for the second time or first time or refurbishing your website, and that's probably a topic for another day. Some of us use professional webmasters, and we need to be able to communicate with them about what we want. Others of us use the free programs and need to know what people are looking for. So my last tip would be to look over the shoulder of first a family member or a friend, and then a stranger, an arbitrary customer who walks into your store. Look over their shoulder and see what they do when they go to your website. Watch where they put the mouse, watch where they tap the screen, see what they're looking for. You'll learn an awful lot by, number one, letting somebody who's familiar with your store look at your website, and number two, a stranger. What are they looking for? If your address and contact information and hours of operation are all on separate web pages, not a good idea. Too much tapping. So watch that, and then you can go back to your webmaster, or you can go back to your master plan for your website and redesign things to make it more user-friendly. And I think Colleen and I are going to talk a little bit more, actually probably Colleen is going to talk a little bit more about that next week, about how to communicate with your webmaster, how to take what they tell you, sometimes with a grain of salt, because after all, it is your business and you know what your customers want, but also you need to know what your customers want. So be sure to, every once in a while, maybe every other week, look over the shoulder of a stranger going through your website and listen to what she has to say, and tell her to talk out loud. Oh, wait a minute, I didn't want to find that. I wanted to find out when they're open. Write that down on your little list, and then you'll know when you're redesigning your website what you need to make more prominent. So I hope today's helped you with some simple things that you can check on your website every week. And I'm going to let Colleen have the last word, because she knows a lot more about websites than I do.
I think this is a really good stopping point, Kate, because honestly, I mean, I could talk for days.
And she often does.
And I often do. That's what I do. So I think, Kate and I, as we were talking this morning, getting ready for our show, we came up with like, oh, we should say this and we should say this. And then Kate's like, okay, we need to like break this down into more topics. So I think we'll kind of stick on this website topic for the next at least 2 or 3 shows and bring you just little tidbits, because it can get a little bit overwhelming. So I think the takeaway from this week is, no matter what kind of website you have, no matter if it was professionally built by a web developer or you built it yourself, just get in the habit of going to your website. I recommend on a weekly basis, because how quickly things can change. So just start looking at your website and just really look at it and see, like, is all the information there, and get into that habit of checking it. So I would kind of say that would be the takeaway from this week. Go through the little checklist of everything we talked about this morning, and then join us next week when we maybe add a little bit more onto your to-do list, or talk a little bit more about enhancing your website. So that is all I have. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on this hot topic of websites. And just a reminder, everyone, the NARTS conference is coming up in June, and it is in Columbus, Ohio. And Kate, what are you talking on at the conference?
I'm talking about the user experience, and in my 45-minute workshop, I hope to touch on not only the bricks and mortar experience, but also on the online experience. What your website, what your Shopify, what your blog, what your social media says about your store, and how it motivates them to shop with you. So that's going to be my workshop. Colleen's doing a workshop on
digital marketing, and we're actually going to take a look at what's working, like really what's working, what's the biggest bang for your dollar in terms of dollars and time as well. Where should you really be spending your time? What's in, what's out? So that's my 45-minute workshop. And NARTS, if you're not a member of NARTS, just an amazing I think a lot of people get their biggest aha moments and takeaways, not necessarily from the workshops, but from the conversations that happen in between the workshops over a glass of wine, the sharing, the stories, wouldn't you say, Kate? That
It's probably the second or third best investment that you can make in your business if you really want to make a go of your business, if you want to get out of the mom and pop category into being able to take your spouse on a wonderful vacation because you're so successful. You need to attend NARCH, you need to belong to NARCH, you need to talk to Colleen, you need to talk to Kate. We hope you'd enjoyed our little to-do list today about taking care of your website on a regular basis. Next week, we'll talk about perhaps tailoring your website to what your customers want to know about you. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
all right, bye everyone. Have a fabulous week. Bye, Kate.
Bye-bye. See you later.